Hi, I'm Roxana Parra Sepulveda, your host at Mind Your Mind podcast, a reflective and practical space for frontline workers from diverse care and helping professions, working, advocating, or supporting others, no matter your level of experience. In Mind Your Mind, we believe that wanting to help others is great, but knowing how to do it while continuing taking care of yourself is even better. In this podcast, you will hear from experienced psychotherapists, community workers, clinical supervisors, and thinkers promoting well-being, offering you a reflective material to work from, a psychologically informed viewpoint, and giving you tips and practical ideas to develop your personally meaningful self-care strategy. If you want to enhance your practice, avoid secondary traumatization and burnout, and maintain a sense of purpose and fulfillment while you're doing your job, this podcast is for you. Hello as well to everybody that is in France. Welcome to the Mind Your Mind, episode 2. Today we will be with Christian talking about the triple stance framework, a work that you have been developing for many years and something that we have been talking about for many years as well. So I'm thrilled to have you here, and thank you for being here as well, Christian. Christian is a Mexican psychoanalyst. He has been working, developing the triple stance and working with vulnerable people. He started his work in Mexico with young people that were homeless, and from all of that experience, he was developing the triple stance framework. But I will leave Christian to tell us more about the origin of the triple stance framework and a bit more about what it's all about. And I hope I have made as much as possible a credit to all your trajectory, Christian. I know that you are a very experienced therapist as well. So let's get on with knowing more about the triple stance. Tell us about what is the origin of the triple stance.
Okay. Well, you're right. I am a psychoanalyst. I was doing my training as psychoanalyst in Mexico City, and as you might know, training as a psychoanalyst is a very long training. Back then it was 6 years, so it was quite a lot. And in the meantime, I was a professor at the university. I gave social and cultural psychology at the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City, where I studied psychology. So it was interesting because there, one thing that's very nice about this university is that we have field work from the very beginning. Developmental psychology, adolescence groups, community psychology, cultural psychology. We're always involved in the terrain. So I was asked to give a course, and it was there when I met Pro Ninos de la Calle, the institution that worked with and still works with vulnerable people from back then. It was, I'm sorry, my dog is here, but he'll join me.
Okay, he's welcome as well.
So I started working with Pro Ninos de la Calle as a professor for the university, and something interesting happened. Well, I started recognizing a two-way of looking at behavior or suffering, as whatever you want to call it. I was being trained as a psychoanalyst, and from a psychoanalytical point of view, the most important things were drives, fantasies, even neurosis is defined as an intrapsychic conflict. So it was all had to do with a mind that was mostly inside someone. On the other hand, we had the field work we did with the people on the streets. And the most important thing to take into account to understand what was going on actually were situations, the environment. Mm-hmm. More than the drive or behavior was better explained, understanding what triggered it. No, from the outside, not so much, no, at least not only from the inside. Mm. So I started having this double vision, and eventually, well, it became, I came to discover, let's say, the obvious, but from a very, very, very experiential perspective, that mind is something that happens between people, not something that happens only inside someone, but it's a process, a complex process that allows us to manage the relationships between people inside of us and outside of us. And that was part of what led us to the triple stance, this dialogue between inside and outside. But there was also another gap. That was one of the gaps that the triple stance addressed. The other gap was that most of the information, the training, the tools I was learning, they were not really accessible to the people who were on the trenches, on doing the field work.
Or frontline workers.
The frontline workers. They were doing they were carrying so much load without having the tools. But the people who had the tools were not on the field. So there was this large gap between what I knew, the training I was having, courses I was taking, even in Mexico. This is mostly in Mexico. Even the literature, the articles, the books, they mostly were in English. That was not accessible to most part of the field workers, the frontline workers.
Yeah.
So how could we? What could we do about that? How could we make all of this information accessible for someone who is in the best position to help, but doesn't have the tools? So working mostly to prevent burnout, which was the first thing I noticed in the people from that were working in Pro Ninos de la Calle, we started doing workshops. And the critical part was when we started working with Stuart Twemlow, who helped us very, very much in developing the House for Transitional Living, which is a project that Pro Ninos developed back in 2008. And there we started working with three axes, and an axe that we called cooperation. The Cooperation Act, which had to do mostly with administrative and cooperation within the house, the practical stuff, how much the young people who had decided to quit the streets but were lacking social skills, because they had street skills, but that are very useful for the streets, but they had to learn new skills to manage practical things like keeping a job. So those, how to manage the most basic things in a house, they had to, we call that the cooperation dimension. We also started working with how to regulate their emotions. All that had to do with attachment. We called it attachment dimension. And communication skills, taking perspective, being able to establish a dialogue. We call that the mentalizing the dimension.
In a minute, we will get more into look at each of these dimensions so everybody
Yes.
can understand, because these dimensions are the core of how the triple stance work and can be applied as well. But I think you have put in two very important points in terms of what were the gaps that the triple stance was trying to address, because we know that many of the advocates and people that are working frontline, there are many professionals that comes from, if we think about, for example, within the NHS, obviously the majority has some training that gives them the tools to do their job, right? But there is many people as well that do not have a psychological kind of training. Exactly. They are working with survivors of trauma, with people that are living and experiencing all sorts of very, very difficult situations in life, like homelessness, for example, but they not necessarily has the psychological viewpoint to help them to understand as well that interaction, not that interface of what's going on in the mind of the other, but also what's going on in my own mind. So the inter, and external as well. Yes. And so those three elements that gets into this in play when we are in a conversation with someone that we are also trying to help, no? Exactly. We are wanting to help them, support them, encourage them to do something different with their life and move and create change, no? In that process, when coming from a place of maybe suffering and trauma to a place of thriving and becoming stronger and powerful within themselves as well. No, yes. And manage all the emotional impact of trauma. So there are many aspects that the frontline workers are working with, not only doing the specific task that they are there for, but they are also working with this whole world of elements that we are talking about.
Yes, and what I've came to notice is that we started working with all of that and discovering all of that firsthand. Yeah. It was nothing new. Mm. It had already been described, written, and studied, but we actually discovered it by ourselves through the work, as you have just said. I noticed they were suffering vicarious trauma, and I was doing my thesis on trauma. Uh-huh. The link wasn't, I had to discover the link by myself, by working with the frontline workers. All of this implicit regulation they were doing, besides playing with someone or walking with someone in the street. That was the explicit dimension. But everything that was beneath it, or maybe around it, I don't know. But all of the processes that were taking place at the same time, we had to discover them, name them, understand them, make them explicit, and that started to give us this three axes. We arrived at this three axes not because we just chose them, it's because they made sense, and the team started to help us define those axes because of the way they worked, what they made sense to them, what allowed them better to work, to integrate. The triple stance framework is because in one reunion, we said each educator has to engage the relationship from a triple stance. Has to engage each interaction from a triple point of view. The same thing has to be read from a behavioral dimension, how we coordinate with someone through movement, how we engage with someone, how we articulate our emotional response with someone at the same time. It's the same thing, just different ways of looking at it.
Yeah.
And how we imagine the interaction, how we represent this interaction. So that made sense, because I'll be speaking more about it, but it was through the practice that we arrived at the obvious.
Yeah, wonderful. And that's the thing, so many times that we find ourselves that in those moments in which you see how necessary it is to make the connection between the theory and the practice. And that's the exercise that we will be doing here in the podcast, constantly trying to bring the theory that will assist the better understanding of the practice, and that in itself will hopefully also help people to manage anxiety and the impact of the work as well. So why don't we talk a little bit more in detail of the 3 dimensions of the triple stance? We said cooperation, mentalization, and attachment.
Yes. Well, these 3 dimensions, as I said, are 3 perspectives. They are very general, but they help the frontline worker to make sense of different experiences. In a nutshell, it's the old saying that people are biological people, psychological, and social. These 3, it's the same thing, only with with new information and new ways of looking at it. But it's the same. Cooperation is the basic. We use in the triple stance framework, we use figures to represent each dimension. And if we have the time, I'll explain a little bit how we use them to make sense of exchanges. It's a coding system.
Yeah.
But basically, we use a square to represent cooperation. Cooperation, in a way, it's culture, it's the situation, it's the movement, is the way we coordinate our bodies with other people. That's why it's so important, movement. And it's mostly implicit. That means we have ways of engaging with others that are not reflective, that we think through movement. The triple stance framework it's mostly 2 things. It's a model of minds and a way of planning and engaging relationships for frontline workers. And here we see the mind dimension, thinking about the mind as this process, complex process between and within people. A very important part of mind is movement, is how we move along. And that
but also how we are coordinating our movements together to move.
Exactly, because we're not isolated people. All the movement we do is always we are always influencing others, and we're always the object of others' influence.
And this coordination as well can be related to a task on hand, right?
Exactly. And what I have just said regarding influence, people who have studied social psychology will say, "Oh, influence, that's a word we hear in social psychology, no?" And what you have just said takes us directly to Michael Tomasello, which is an author that has been very, very influential in the triple stance framework, because cooperation if seen in this dimension, it has to do with working together, coordinating each other, and in a nutshell, most of what Michael Tomasello has said regarding to human cooperation means that cooperation as humans do it is quite exclusive. It's very, very particular, because we engage with others through joint intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
So this first dimension, when we take into account someone's culture, for example, we're looking at the exchange, at the relationship through mostly the cooperation dimension. What are the ways of understanding a meal, for example, social roles, for example? I can't just engage with someone if I don't have some kind of notion of their religious practices, for example. I can, here in France, I can't just kiss a woman if she's a Muslim practitioner, because they don't do that. It's a lack of respect of my part, not noticing that. That is a frame that will allow me to engage with the other, that I have to respect.
Absolutely, yes.
So the first dimension, rules. How, at what time are we going to meet? Establishing rules, the setting
and boundaries as well, no?
Boundaries,
the boundaries
of
that
course,
will give the frame to the type of relationship that we have, and how and when we will be engaging. The simple act of organizing an appointment with a service user, for example, that will be part of the cooperation dimension.
Exactly. All the rules. How are we going to get this done?
Yeah.
The how has a lot to do with the corporations establishing roles. What is your task? What is my task?
Yeah.
From what time to what time are we going to meet? And that is fundamental. That is without that, we're really lost.
Yeah. So there are other elements that will be supporting the other elements of the triple stance framework will be supporting the cooperation side, right?
Of course, and the cooperation can be seen as one element of the triple stance is scaling or changing, or zooming in or zooming out. The rules that will be applied, for example, in a meeting or a session between therapist and patient, can't go, have to be well synchronized with the philosophy of the institution. So you have to keep in mind that all of this, that it's moving towards culture. You see?
Yes. So you are
also,
you are also including in the frame. You are also need to be considering the protocols, the procedures, and so on that are part of the organization. Is like a bigger element of containment that provides
an example of this dimension within which we have to work has to do with how much we get paid. The current rules or law regarding migration in our countries, we have that's part of the big framework.
Yeah.
And all of the work has to be done within this framework.
Yeah.
And not noticing that it's a source of suffering.
Yes, and those that are working, sorry to interrupt you, Christian, but those that I'm thinking about the people that are listening the podcast as well, you know, those that are, for example, working with refugees, with people that are in the process of living here in the UK, for example, and supporting them. They will understand all the rules and the regulations of migration, for example, and those are the elements that will be influencing the aspect of cooperation, that how we do this together. No?
Yes.
So what about attachment?
Well, if talking about attachment.
Yeah.
Well, if let me say it like this. What happens when we only observe rules? We become rigid. We become we no longer cooperate. We're more in the coercive framework. because the idea of establishing rules is because we want something, because we take care of others. These rules are set in place in order to follow a motivation to work together. They're not there only to limit our behavior. They're to facilitate, to coordinate something that we want to do together.
Exactly.
So if the coordination is how are we going to do this, the attachment is the motivation to work together, the need we have as human beings of joining. That's why it has more to do with the mammalian brain, with the emotions, with memory, with development, of taking into account not only what the culture establishes, but what your own history has favored or inhibited in terms of relationships. The internal working models, the attachment the style that you might have, whether organized or secure, organized, insecure, or disorganized, will be very, very important to take into account as how we move more towards each person here in terms of what your history will favor in terms of how we're going to engage with each other. Okay, so when we talk about the attachment dimension, or how we regulate each other, it's very important to know that we're open systems and we co-regulate each other. We're designed to exchange with others our emotional state and influence each other through emotions. And emotions are so much faster than we can represent. The circuit of emotions is much faster than what we can put into words. So we'll be already moving towards thinking something because we're already feeling something, and then we'll be just maybe we might explain it, but the people who are frontline workers are very vulnerable to all of this emotional impact. And this is very, very important to keep in mind, that the people who have the vocation to help each other, they are very vulnerable. No, and the attachment dimension keeps in mind how vulnerable and how we're influenced by others' emotions, and how we have our own history and how we might have our own biases. We might tend to see certain things easier, but have a more difficult time acknowledging other stuff.
Absolutely.
And that makes us vulnerable.
Yes, and we need to remember that if we think about the attachment theory that was developed by Bowlby, John Bowlby, the British psychiatrist, we will talk much more about attachment over the next episodes as well, for everybody to understand better this theory. And we feel, as you say, so important because it's talking about the way that we see ourselves, we see the others, and we see the world. So that will also influence the way that we can relate to others, and it's taking into account our own history, our own resilience as well in the process, because we will be depending on the quality of our attachment along life and our own experiences. We will be developing different ways of managing all of that, all that stress that we may have experienced, or even trauma in our own history. So we are relating to our clients from that.
Through us, through our history.
Us. Yes, we are, or everybody that is in the frontline work, we are our own tool of work, and that's what makes us vulnerable in a way, as you say, no, because we are transparent and we can be impacted by the emotions of others, and obviously that will. I always talk about the fact that every client will touch us somehow.
Yes,
somewhere.
of course. It was Paul Vaslevik who said you cannot communicate.
Yeah.
And in a sense, is you can't be outside the system. You will be touched, and you will touch also. That means
Exactly.
we are exposed, and our brains are designed to engage with others' brains. The difference is in which way are you going to manage this exchange?
Yes, and how as well that engagement will happen in a way that will then hopefully create trust within that relationship and the interaction, no? That will then support and allow that element of cooperation as well.
Exactly. Yes.
And what about mentalization, since we are here?
Oh, yeah, we're approaching, and you remind me when you said trust, you recently we had a meeting, a reunion, as we usually have from a triple stand framework. We have weekly reunions with a team to think together, to feel together. And there was a situation in one of our centers which has become really difficult, because there are more and more people with a very severe psychological and physical pathology. And this is becoming very hard, and it has made the team a little bit suspicious of policies. There are important changes within the big framework in Europe, as you know. It's becoming more and more difficult. The laws are becoming more strict. This we see the effect of the big picture putting pressure on individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our colleagues expressed that she had lost confidence, she had lost trust in the team as a whole,
which is a very common feeling.
Yes, because
it can happen to anyone.
We see so much this contradictions from the extremes that we're sometimes, frontline workers are sometimes asked to do almost the impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll get back to that, but
mm-hmm.
but briefly, she said, how can I regain trust? And we said, well, we understand your feelings, that you have lost hope. That's attachment dimension. That's and what we offer you to regain this trust is being very respectful of the setting of the rules with which we're working. We've made the square, and to keep a very close dialogue with you, to talk a lot about this. And that's the triangle. That's the mentalizing.
Yeah.
And this is a nice example. I found this a nice example because the mentalizing is how if you see someone you can see some of this mentalizing through how someone speaks, its language, but it's much more than that. It's imagination. It's empathy. It's being able to take a perspective, see things from a perspective, put yourself into the perspective of the other, be curious about the other, being able to not knowing, of absolute certainty about something. It's not very much mentalizing, because the game is over. You already know everything. Being curious, in contrast, has a lot more to do with exploring, to just what's over there, what has that, and that is also an aspect of mentalizing. Just being curious, being open to new experience, to discover things. That's the exploration motivational system, to explore, to discover, you know. And also we put into this dimension agency, the experience. How do you experience agency? Do you experience agency as an intentional experience, or you just react as a reflex, or you're able to plan ahead and follow a project and picture yourself as a goal oriented, that you will follow certain steps? All of this has to do with the mentalizing dimension. So in this example, we see the three dimensions together. One lacking. This colleague was feeling low on attachment, but we can use the other two to recover, to regain trust. So if someone it has a sense of insecurity, this means that you can work attachment through other dimensions. You will foster a sense of security by being very, very observant of the coherence of the rules you set, the importance of respecting a schedule. If you say you will be at 9,
consistency.
You have to be at 9.
Yeah.
Because this behavior, the cooperation, coordination, will be influencing the way the person feels.
Absolutely. And that has to do with being reliable, no? The message that you are by if you say 9, being there at 9, then you are
exactly
sending a message of reliability.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, and if you can put into words, you can say, well, if by chance there was a problem and I couldn't be exactly at 9, but you're still able to talk about it, you can explore how hard it is for someone who is feeling already insecure, not to conclude that your lateness has to do with lack of interest.
Exactly.
And not that you had a problem. You were thinking, you were at the bus, oh, I'm late, and blah, blah. It's nothing but lack of interest. But there was a problem with the bus. But you remain, you keep this capacity of putting yourself in the shoes of the other, to share their perspective. Oh, I know it's so hard for you not to jump into this conclusion when you had so much of this in your history.
Exactly.
I'm so sorry.
So when we are talking about the triple stance, we are thinking as well about something that you touched at the beginning with regards to the gaps, no? And I think it will be super important to hear what you have to say, Christian, about how the triple stance can support frontline workers and help them to manage anxiety, reduce the potential impact of secondary traumatization, and maintain a sense of purpose as well, no? Because when you get into that line of emotional exhaustion and getting into a place of secondary traumatization, yourself experiencing symptoms that your clients are experiencing as well, then it's easy to lose purpose, right? It's easy to lose the interest and the drive of the work that we are doing. And it's so nice to see as well how you are sharing your chair with your dog.
You've noticed he's taking over. Yeah. Yeah, and he does this all the time.
It's
So
just
I have to like I'm right now I'm using
in
like
the corner of the
what
chair.
percent he's taking over. Okay.
So and that kind of interactions as well are part of all the little elements that help us to manage the levels of anxiety that probably our work can bring, but also to maintain sort of a level of protection and
Yes.
to avoid secondary traumatization. But how do you see the triple stance can help people doing this?
Well, in several ways, and I to keep it simple, and we'll have time to develop. But one thing is that it allows frontline workers to have the space, the mental space to share their experiences. Their mental space, because mental space and interpersonal space are the same thing from the triple stance. So when I say mental space, I mean we rely a lot on group supervision to share our experiences, to experience being being held in mind by someone else. This is the first thing. If we had to keep only one element of the triple stance, I would keep the culture of meeting regularly and sharing our experiences with all of our teammates. That's the most important thing, just to share respectfully and honestly what we feel, what we think, what we do. Because sometimes I've noticed that people share, but from a very rational point of view, what they know, what they've done. And in Mexico, we've come a long way, and every week that we get together, we start by using emotional language. How are we feeling? And that might sound silly, but we're not used to sharing how we feel, how we're currently feeling. How are we feeling at the moment of the meeting? And how are we feeling throughout the meeting? It's, if you notice, it's like a little bit of mindfulness throughout the session, because you notice how your feeling changes as you listen to someone speak. This relationship, I'd like to say that when you mentioned that, something in me changed. I started feeling this. This has become normal in Mexico, in Pro Ninos de la Calle. But it's not something I see a lot around.
So he's creating this safe space that allows them to reflect and think together, but also to feel together and to support each other in that process. I know there is a sort of an outcome as well of the triple stance, and I really like it. Is we take care of each other.
Yes, sí.
Can you say it?
Yes, I'll say it in Spanish, because it's in Spanish. I haven't found a translation neither in French nor in English, but it's juntos nos ayudamos, nos cuidamos y nos divertimos.
So we have
the translation is more or less, together we help each other, we take care of each other, and we have fun together. Which means that together we make so many things together, much more than whatever we could do by ourselves. We are a cooperative species. So we help each other. We coordinate with each other to do stuff, to do things. But this is a principle. This is like 3 guidelines of the triple stance that I use a lot with families, because you're going to cooperate and you're going to coordinate with each other as long as you take care of each other. Which means all of the 3 dimensions have to work for all of them.
But there are also applicable, if we think about, for example, people that are working doing humanitarian intervention.
Of course.
They will be in a team where they are, allocated in a place that normally is very small, and they are all together. And that's also part of what's going on there. They are all with one focus and going and supporting a group of people in a situation of crisis. But then there is what happens within the team, no?
Of course.
How the team can then become a sort of family for you in certain.
Of course, you're absolutely right.
In those moments, but also in the day-to-day, we spend so many hours with our team colleagues, no?
Of course. The idea I wanted to point to here is that coordination without attachment and without mentalizing it's just coordination. It doesn't mean that we're going to take care of someone. You can coordinate to harass someone.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea here is that we're coordinating to take care of each other. That we're linked. That those 2 are linked.
Yes.
So as you
like
said,
having the back of each other, no, in a way.
As you say, maybe it's not the best to have 20 people in a small setting. But if you keep in mind that the idea is to take care of each other, that will help you coordinate in order to better achieve the well-being of having to work together in not perfect conditions. And to achieve these 2 sometimes is quite difficult. But if you can use your imagination, if you can mentalize the situations, if you can talk to each other and clarify what was it you thought when I did this, and maybe you think that I did because I don't like you because of your accent, and that makes sense because and we clarify that, then we can make things even better.
Absolutely.
And that is and that's why the mentalizing goes along with having fun, because it's related to exploring, to being free, to self-definition, to having fun. What's the point of being secure if you can't have fun?
Absolutely. No? So what I hear from what you're saying is that the triple stance framework can operate and support, that the glue of the team while in the day-to-day work, but also in these spaces that are necessary of having a moment to stop and reflect together. These reflective spaces as well, and in which the triple stance will be able to assist in order for them to look at the situations that they are bringing, not only from your intellectual side, but also bringing your emotions and thinking about how that will then impact in the way that you behave towards your clients, towards your team, etc. Christian, we are reaching the end of our session today. Thank you so very much. This is so exciting and it's so interesting to talk about the triple stance. I mean, I love the way.
Thank you very much. We're just getting started. Thank you and congratulations for your podcast. It's fantastic. Thank you for inviting me and hope to see you soon.
See you soon. Definitely see you soon. You will see that Christian will be with us in the future as well. We will continue to talk about the triple stance. How do we apply it? We will be thinking about different aspects of it. And so we will be here again. And thank you for being there, Christian.
Thank you. Un abrazo.
Un abrazo.